Hello and welcome. I'm as always your host Elizibar. This is a review of MidBoss. Before we get into it, I got to say two things. One is I've been meaning to do this review for a long time. It's been at least a couple of months since the Let's Play of it ended. If you haven't watched that, you should go check it out. I will have a link in the description below. The other thing, and it's the more important one, is in the interest of full disclosure, I do have to say that I did not buy MidBoss. It was given to me by a viewer. Spirit Magic Helmet was like, hey, I want to watch you play this, and I don't want any excuses, so here it is. And he just shoved the game at me, and then I got started. MidBoss is a game in the roguelike genre. Roguelikes are RPGs centered around delving through a randomized dungeon crawl, battling ever deeper into the dungeon, collecting loot, amassing power, and generally killing everything you encounter. MidBoss adds a twist to the genre with its unique mechanic, possessing enemies for their stats and their skills. Rather than choosing a race and a class at the start of the game, you customize your powers and statistics on the fly by stealing and then mastering the forms and skills of your enemies. As mechanics go, it's a breath of fresh air. The game takes place in an isometric dungeon populated with enemies and destructible items. The game can be played with both the mouse and the keyboard, and I found myself using a combination of them as I played. Typically I use the keyboard for movement, and I use the mouse to aim my spells. There's a large variety of enemies, from bats to rats to animated weapons, to minotaurs, horrifying worms, and so on. Later enemies are frequently palette swaps or variations on earlier enemies. For example, the Minotaur leads to the Megator, the Rat leads to the Hell Rat, and there are 4 or 5 different bats to choose from. Despite the enemies sometimes feeling a little redundant, the graphics are charming, and the sprites of both the main character and the enemies are pleasant to look at. The dungeon tile set gets a little boring to look at. I was honestly hoping for a bit more variation in the environments, which could also justify some additional variation in enemies and powers. Combat is accomplished by one of two means. First is the normal melee attack. Walk into an enemy, boom! Melee attack. This is also the way interactions with other objects take place, whether you're breaking open chests, busting up bookshelves, using a shrine, or selling to the merchant. The other way to attack enemies is with abilities. To use those, first you select the ability, and then you target the ability. And there are abilities that use stamina, which is typically physical in nature, and abilities that use mana, which are more magical in nature. Sadly, from my experience, the combat system really seems to favor magic. Magic attacks are typically longer range than physical ones, allowing the player character to attack without being hit. Magic is also the only reliable source of healing, and there are 2 ways to accomplish that. The first is the spell Life Leech, which you first gain from a vampire bat, and it provides a constant low-level source of healing. The second is the act of possessing an enemy, which refills the health bar and the mana bar and probably the stamina bar, but I honestly never paid attention to that one. And I found it easiest to kite enemies and spam Life Leech on them until they died, and I could do that for almost the entire game. Combat became very one-dimensional. There's also no difficulty curve. Enemies either seem to come in dies easily or kills you in one-hit varieties. It was too many encounters with the latter type that sent me scurrying for the ranged kiting power of magic abilities. From talking with a few other people that played the game, they had similar experiences of running into the same enemies, skeletons, minotaurs, and aether bats, and being completely shocked and dying the first time they showed up. The sound design is simple and pleasant. There's nothing standout about it. Sound effects are serviceable, they get the point across, they sound like what they should sound like. The music sets the mood perfectly. It maybe gets a little bit old, but it never became tiresome or annoying in any way. It was atmospheric, and it kept me engaged as a player. Maybe I wouldn't listen to it outside of the game itself, but it was a great accompaniment. There are 2 paths of character progression in the game. As mentioned earlier, enemies each have abilities that can be stolen from them. Spending time in a particular form gives that form more experience, unlocking further abilities until the form is mastered. But the player character can also level up independent of that, gaining more health, getting more mana, and getting more stat points to spend. The mechanics are fairly transparent. Stats are displayed prominently, the properties of equipment are stated plainly, although there are some cases where it's not apparent what a piece of gear or an ability will actually do until it's been equipped and tried a time or two. Two things that do remain opaque to me throughout my gameplay were the glitch door mechanic and the secret to unlocking the Cat Merchant's next ability tier. I never made progress on either of those mysteries, and I can't find that, as of this writing, anyone else has come out and given useful hints on them. There's another mechanic that's somewhat mysterious, and it's about the shrines that populate the game. This feature was intentionally left obscure by the developers, and they've been trying to get people to populate the official wiki with their findings, but as of right now, no one really has a clue how this stuff actually works or has published any kind of guide about it. In my experience, the shrines just give me curses, basically no matter what items I sacrifice on them. As of this review, the game is missing some features, such as throwing potions at enemies. The developers are actively working on that feature, as well as the addition of various quality of life features. The most prominent one is easier inventory management. While I was playing the game, there was a patch that added new functionality onto armor. It was compatible with my old saves, and it just made the new pieces of equipment that I got do stuff a little bit better. As a last note, the game being a roguelike, it has no save feature independent of autosaves and exiting the game. So if you die in a stupid way on the last floor, you need to start all over and replay the last several hours in a new dungeon. It's a genre convention, but it could be something surprising for anyone who isn't familiar with roguelikes. It adds replay value, but can also be frustrating. So here's a quick rundown in bullet point form. There's solid gameplay with a fun mechanic, and it has surprising difficulty spikes. It could maybe use more variety of enemies. It has pleasing graphics. Some variety in dungeon locales would have been nice. Solid sound effects, atmospheric music, lots of replay value due to so much being random. However, the brutal nature of the game and its adherence to roguelike save game conventions can be dispiriting. Overall, I'd give MidBoss 6 out of 10. It's not my favorite genre, but I enjoyed about 30 hours with the game. The retail price of the game is $15 on Steam, and I think I got a lot of enjoyment out of the game for that price point, even if I'm not the one that, actually paid it, because I got the game for free. So, that's it for the review. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And by that I mean, if you've played MidBoss, what do you think about the things I'm talking about? I guess one final point is the death card mechanic. When you do die, you can restart your next game with the death card, meaning you can take a piece of equipment from your current game into your next one and get a leg up on the competition. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I will see you next time. I'm looking forward to hearing from you about your experiences with MidBoss, whatever they are. Bye-bye.